We'll get back to this in a moment. Yes, good idea. We have here we have a tail section with left engine and central engine, and the right engine was detached and found earlier. So the first ground contacts you will see in the upper left corner. You can, let me see if I can move a mouse here. You have here one trace and here another ground trace, and I'll get back to these in a moment. Just to give you an overview, because we've been showing fragments, I want to give you an overview with this slide. We have from what's called the traffic alert, the terrain alert and warning system, TAUS we call it. We have recorded data which give us trajectory during approach. And these are shown, the trajectory during approach from these data are shown with the yellow dots to the right here. So the plane is approaching from right side, and at this moment here, which is about 900 meters before the runway, and the runway would be over here. At this moment where you have the first red star is where the first destruction of the aircraft occurs. And this is, in crash investigations, is a very important moment, because this is, the first destruction is giving the clue to what is happening further on. So here, wingtip is lost, and this is, by the way, about 100 meters before the birch tree that the Russians were claiming caused the cutting of the left wing. Fragments were found 40 meters to the one side, 20 meters to the other side of this tree, and the plane initiated a left roll, not because of losing the left wingtip. We know this, and Professor Binyenda will get back to this in a moment, but because it lost the flaps and the slats together with the wingtip. It initiated a left roll and hit the ground over to the left here, and the picture you saw with all the fragments is from this area. Okay, we have some measurements on the way which are shown with green squares. And now I'll leave the microphone for Professor Binyenda.
Okay, so one of the items of investigation was to answer the question, is it possible that this airplane hit the tree? In order to answer this question, we look at the leading edge and so-called slats that you can see in this particular picture. And we reconstructed piece by piece the whole slat. I will show you the simulation, what would happen in a moment, what would happen if the tree would hit the, if the wing will hit the tree. Well, in all investigations that shows that the slat should be destroyed completely because it is made of very thin aluminum, about 1 millimeter thick. So any contact with the tree should completely destroy about 1 meter of the length of the slat. To our surprise, when we reconstructed the slat, we could find that there is no sign of 1 meter destruction of the slat. And on the contrary, deformation of the slat shows that metal is pushed forward, not backward. If, of course, it is hitting the obstacle would destroy the damage or deform the material backwards. But we can see here identification of all parts and how it is deformed. Of course, after it was destroyed as a one entity, then falling parts hit some elements. So you have secondary deformation, but this is not a major deformation of 80-ton airplane flying with the speed of 160 miles per hour into the solid structure. Same from the behind, we can see all the elements, and in a moment you will see how we have found all these parts, segments on the ground. The segments were distributed from the location before the tree, on the tree, and as far as 270 meters behind the tree. Again, the aerodynamics is such that if very light material is separated, small fragment, it will quickly lose its velocity. Only heavy part can, if they are removed from the structure, can fly on its own due to the inertia a significant distance. So when we found all these small fragments so far away, the only way for them to be there is to destroy itself or separate from the airplane on much higher altitude, and basically, that is the explanation where they could be found. One part, this is the slat track. It was the the farthest distance because it is made of steel and it is very heavy, about 4 kilograms of very concentrated mass. This is, you can see the distributed of each segments in 4 areas, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can see this is the location of the birch tree, and you can see where those parts are distributed. The heaviest part flew as far as 270 meters away. Of course, we didn't only stop on that part. We need to do many investigations, and if all agree that the wing cannot hit the tree, then that is the conclusion. So one of the experiments we conducted in the United States was to, excuse me, can you help me? It was to use the gas gun of the University of Akron, and we basically produced the impact with the aluminum projectile into a birch tree. So you can see here that the top of the tree will fall always along the direction of the flight of the object. And of course, the other is that the lower part has the sheared surface. Now, the tree in Smolensk was interesting because has the upper part has fallen 90 degrees to the direction of the flight, and it has not sheared surface at all. Okay, so this too is the evidence of the fact that there was no contact between the airplane as a whole mass with the birch tree. If it would be, this is the looking from the top. You can see here the wing and the tree looking from the top. Look at the beginning, at the leading edge. What would happen to the leading edge? And of course, this wing cut through this birch tree, which is exactly of the same dimension as the one in Smolensk. And this is the wing, which is exactly the same as it is in Tupolev. So, first of all, you could see that the, could you run it again? That the leading edge has a huge damage. This deformation cannot be hidden. You could see the shape and size of this deformation. And of course, even if it would happen, this distance from here to here is more than 1 meter, okay? And this material is completely eroded. And we found that material. We found all segments we could reconstruct. So we know that this could not happen. But even if it would happen, the first spar, which goes over there, will cut that tree because obviously the tree is not as strong as steel. And any of you who live in the United States remember September 11 when the airplane hit the World Trade Center. Outside of the World Trade Center, there are steel columns of the thickness of the military tank. And airplane which is made of aluminum, was able at that speed cut through a number of those columns, not one, but many. Here we have one very wet and poor quality, as Professor Cieszewski can explain, birch tree.
Furthermore, if we take a look at the wingtip that was cut, because this wingtip was found 120 meters away from the birch tree, we see all the classic signs of explosion. Here are signs that are taken direct. You could use this directly in the handbook for forensic investigation of explosions, and it has all the same features as we see. One very important signature, and we have to distinguish between signatures and characteristic signs. A signature is something that can only be explained by explosion. And for instance, here you have curled edges. This is the bottom side of the wing, and you have the top side here. Front side of the wing is here. If we take a close look at these curls from the side, they look like this. So here you have more than 450-degree curling edge, which is classical, significant sign of explosion. Cannot be explained any other way. And we have this confirmed by 3 independent bodies, including Frank Taylor. And they came to the same conclusion, all 3 independent of each other, same conclusion as we had reached, that this is high internal pressure. If we take a close look at the edge here, which is the trailing edge, you'll see that it's curling even a 4 millimeter thick piece. Okay, to understand the mechanism behind this, we did a series of experiments. I think more than 70 different experiments was done by the finest pyrotechnical team in Poland under the leadership of Professor Adrian Siatkowski. And here is just an example of some of his work, together with some of the work that Professor Witkowski did. And these are 2 different scales. Here's in scale 1:1. Idea in both of them are to demonstrate that the wing can be cut. Even if there's fuel inside, you can cut this by explosives and produce similar results without the fuel exploding. Okay.
So, of course, if we would have more time, we could show some of those pyrotechnic tests. They are quite impressive. But let's go to another study. This is done by Institute of Aviation, Professor Krzysiak, that basically together with Wojskowa Akademia Techniczna, Professor Olejnik, worked in the new program called LARE. This program it will involve many steps, but one of the steps was to use the scanning of identical airplane, Tupolev 154M102, which is sitting right now on the tarmac of Minsk airport, military airport. And together with American friends, they scanned inside and outside of this airplane in order to build the numerical model. That model, in the next step, was used using the technology Print 3D, and in various scales, starting with 1 to 100, then 1 to 50, and now 1 to 40, and in the plans are 1 to 14, to build the model, which next was put into wind tunnel. Wind tunnel is the device that is used by aviation experts to check the aerodynamics of the airplane or its parts. So the objective of this was to see how this airplane would behave if it is in perfect condition, or how it will behave if we cut out 1/3 of the wing, either by whatever mean, it doesn't matter for that study. And is it possible, to answer the question, is it possible for pilot to fly this airplane even if it lost 1/3 of the wing? As you can see from the other end, this study has proven that if the airplane would lose 1/3 of the wing, the pilots can slide the airplane 7 degrees on the left wing. That will shadow the right wing to the point that can continue flight straight. And in fact, one of the situations that we can see on the YouTube, you can find that in identical situation, the Boeing airplane lost 1/3 of the wing due to explosion of the external engine, jet engine, and was able to fly around and land with passengers. And one of the passengers videotaped the whole event with explosion, with the fire of at the wing, with extinguishing that fire, with landing this airplane. And it was big news at that time because, you know, when the airplane has an accident and in the air and lands, this is a news that we hear about. So in this particular case, they proven that even if that 1/3 of the wing would be cut out, the airplane is still under control. Even if the front slats will be removed and leading edge will be removed, this airplane is still under control. However, when the flaps are removed, the structure of the airplane that you can see if you land, that it is going outside, you know, the one in front is called slats, the one in the back of the wing is called flaps. If those flaps you eliminate, then the airplane is not under control anymore. And this is what Glenn Jorgensen mentioned that initiated the roll to the left.
Just to be precise on the amount, because 1/3 of the wing sounds like a lot, but when Professor Pinienta says 1/3, it's 1/3 of the half side of the wing. So in total, from the wingspan is around 14%. Okay, here I want to show you some of the detailed work we did to identify what happened the last 2 seconds of flight. So you'll see the street you see at the above is called Kutuzova Street. Plane is flying from the top towards the crash site, and you'll notice the same traces to the ground here and here. So plane is flying basically along a line here, and I'll show you some of the detailed work we did. We'll have focus on the area of tree damage here. You can see the damaged tree on the satellite photo, and we can zoom in on this. You can also, we also have information from the shadow that is shown on the ground. We know we have several sources of satellite photos, and from this data we can see very accurately the height of the trees, because we have the knowledge of the angle of the sun. It was 39.5 degrees. So this gives us ways of confirmation. And as you know, crash investigation is all about confirmation. So you'll hear me say this word several times. If we take a look at the trees by some of the photos taken by independent photographers, because the area was flooded with journalists, they wanted to see there were the VIPs coming, so there were many journalists, also Polish journalists. This picture here showing the distinct cut is made by a Russian photographer, and this is on the east side of the Kutuzova Street. So the aircraft would hit this tree first, and then the bunch of trees that are circled after. You'll see confirmation of the area where the airplane passed by all the debris that was pushed backwards by the jet engine stream and by cutting, as Professor Benienda showed you earlier, with the wing cutting the trees. And to get a good knowledge of the height of the airplane at this moment when passing, we did some reconstruction of the tree damage. And I won't go into all the detail, but just show you some of the branches that, and from a certain view you have the photograph on the one side and the model of the tree shown in the gray. And just to show you branch by branch, and from different views, we are able to reconstruct the main trees in this area. And then we can, by modeling the shadow of the tree, we know the sun direction, we know the elevation of the sun, we can compare the shadow with the shadow on the ground. And we get reasonable correlation. So all of this is telling us, giving us information of the aircraft at this moment when it's passing these trees. So even we can have some confirmation of damage, local damage on the trees, which are confirming, again, from another level. I want to show you here the final path. You have the tree damage close to the Kutuzova Street in the circle, and we know that the airplane hits the ground here. So there is only one way the airplane can go from the circle to this area, which is shown with the blue line. This is distance of this is around 120 meters. And that's 3 times the length of the airplane. So it's a 78 ton airplane with inertia. So there's only a certain deviation from a straight line that you can do. What is very important here is circled in this area, and we will zoom in on this, because this is giving us, here you see the zoomed in area at the top. You'll notice there's a gray line, that's a shadow from a tree, very important tree. We have the southern ground trace is shown with the red arrow. And this tree is shown to the left here. We call it the said tree. Okay. The said tree. Okay. You have here's a tree. You'll see the shadow here. This is shadow shown on the, so we have confirmation of this tree by the shadow. We have confirmation of the tree from the direct point here. But we have many photos of this tree taken in panorama, taken from different views, all showing the very precise position of this tree. Okay. Yes. This is this tree here. This tree is 6 to 7 meters high. We know that from several sources, by measuring distance to the ground trace, by we have pictures showing where there's a person standing next to the tree, and we have the shadow length on the satellite photo. So they're all confirming this tree is 6 to 7 meters tall. The tree is shown here with the shadow. This is shadow, this is tree. Here you have the southern ground trace and the northern ground trace. So why is this important? And to understand the importance of this tree, we have to jump to the next piece of evidence we have, is a door. This is the left passenger door. It's right, it was located originally right in front of the left wing. It's the main door for the passengers to go in and out. This door was found, as you can see in the circle here in the middle, was found rammed 1 meter into the ground. We had the National Institute of Aviation Research calculate how big velocity would it take to ram this door into the ground and produce at the same time the level of destruction that we had, that we could see when you take the door out of the ground. we know how much the door was destructed. And from this, we can calculate, or they could calculate, the soil properties and the speed of the door. Because you can imagine, if you were to send the door into the butter, very soft, you could easily push it 1 meter in, but when you take it out of the butter, it would hardly be damaged. Whereas if you want to push this door 1 meter into concrete, okay, you would need much higher speed, but when you take the door out, it would probably be all smashed. So by tuning in the soil properties, you can get a good measurement of the actual property of soil in Smolensk. And this is very important for us for the future investigations also. But the main and important thing here is that this door, this is fact, door is rammed 1 meter into the ground, and this is not explained in the Mack and Miller reports at all. What is very important to understand here is, here you see at the bottom some of the simulations done by NIAR in their investigation. They found the speed of this door had to be, what's that in miles per hour? 120 meters per second or higher, 125 meters per second or higher. That means 500 miles per hour. And this is 10 times the speed, the vertical speed of the aircraft at this moment. So something had to give this door 10 times the speed. That means 100 times more energy in a split second. Energy doesn't come from nothing. So this is evidence of high internal pressure pushing this door out. There's no other way it can happen. We know this. Here's some of the work done by NIAR, just to show the level of modeling. We took apart the door. We have a sister plane in Warsaw, outside Warsaw. We took the door apart. We modeled it very accurately. Every rivet, 2,000 rivets positioned, plate thickness, everything. You'll see this is the door in the ground from the other side. At the top you have NIAR's calculations, and the bottom line shows the simulated destruction of the door. And I just want to say that they were very conservative when they said 125 meters per second, because the destruction was even higher than produced here. At the bottom picture you'll see the door from the inside. Inside the upper left corner were found the human remains, where you see the up. In behind the aluminum panel was found the human remains. So this had to go through small crack and end up in the one chamber. Okay, when we look at the orientation of the door and try to figure out where did the epicenter of this high pressure come from, it seems in this case the door is experiencing high internal pressure in the galley area. That's the kitchen area of the aircraft. It would push the door out in a motion like this. And another piece, I don't know if you noticed on the picture, let me just go back. You'll see here at the bottom was completely detached from the door. Even if the door hadn't been pushed to the ground, the experienced crash investigator will tell you that this is evidence that the frame is detached completely from the door, evidence of high internal pressure. It cannot happen during a normal crash. This piece, let's take a look at the movement of this. It's shown here. Again, with the epicenter in the galley area, it would make a movement like this. Now we position the aircraft above the position in the ground where the door was found 1 meter. Okay, we do the same movement, and the door will end up like this. Take away the airplane, you have the left, you have the one ground trace here, second ground trace here, and here's this tree, very important tree that I mentioned before, this tree we marked Z. This is important because this tree wasn't damaged. It wasn't cut by the airplane. So this gives us a minimum height when passing this tree, which tells us that the airplane was in free air when this door was rammed with the speed with 100 times energy, sending it to the ground. We have this confirmed by 5 different methods that the airplane was in the air. Okay, here you see the trees near the Kutuzova Street that were circled, the ones where we showed the shadows from. Plane is at this moment flying over Kutuzova, just passing Kutuzova Street with direction of the blue line. Passing the tree marked Z, which is this tree. The ground trace is here. So there's no way this plane can make this ground trace without passing over this tree. From the simple mass, we can determine the height of the plane. Center of gravity was 6 to 7 meters above the ground. We have the confirmation of this, as I said, by 5 different methods. One is shown here from the pure geometry of the plane that's able to produce a ground trace here from the left wing and a ground trace here from the horizontal stabilizer. This dictates that the airplane is 6 to 7 meters above. This is one confirmation. The other confirmation comes from the flight management systems. We have 2 of them. These are 2 computers that are built in such a way that if and when they lose power, they will store their, a certain set of values, including the height above ground. And we know from this, at this moment, when the door was, when the airplane was above the position where the door was shot to the ground, we know the height from these 2 flight management systems. One said 6 meters, the other said 8 meters. We know from the tree damage, because I showed you how the trees were damaged near the Kutuzova Street, and the fact that we have to pass this one tree gives us a minimum height flying over this tree, and from this we can work out what is the vertical speed towards the ground. I won't go into all the technical details, just tell you that we have confirmation from flight management systems and from the tree damage. And then, as Professor Witkowski showed you in the beginning, from this very important picture showing the opening of the fuselage. So both sides, left side and right side, are outwards. And we know from Sandia Labs, I think Professor Beniendo will explain about the Sandia Labs video. Let me just find it here. Moment. We're running late. Okay, we can show that if for anybody who will have the interest, come to us. I'll skip these. We have confirmation again in a different way. But here, very important picture. This is work done by our committee, and I have to correct our minister because he said that the core of the team is here, but we have very important people in Poland also who prepared this, and they investigated every piece, every fragment of the body found and plotted this. And what is very important here is you'll notice the ground traces. You can see the ground traces here. So this is, the airplane is approaching from this corner, upper right corner, and now moving in this direction. But in this area, where you just saw the airplane was clearly in the air, before fuselage makes ground contact, we have small body parts. We have intestines. We have fragments of the occupants found blown backwards in the opposite direction of the flight. This is, again, very important fact that was completely ignored by the Mack and Miller reports. Pardon? Yes, timeout. So the rest of the dots, this is the last slide. The rest of the dots are showing important information of the occupant, of the bodies found, and how they're distributed. I won't get into detail on that. Thank you.
Oh, okay, we are running late, but at this time I would like to introduce Professor Chris Cieszewski, who is a full professor at Warner School of Forestry at the University of Georgia. He serves as expert and advisor to the committee. Professor Cieszewski is expert on forest biometrics, which consists of statistics, mathematics, and computer sciences used for assessment and modeling of national resources. Professor Cieszewski has extensive background and experience in forest engineering, modeling, simulations, sustainability analysis, and wood engineering. Please welcome Professor Cieszewski.
I just realized listening to Glenn Jorgensen something that I didn't know before. A very quick demonstration is that if this is the wing of the plane and it's a wider at the center than at the end, sorry, this way, then taking a 1/3 of it here, as Glenn Jorgensen said, was about 14% of the total span. But if you look at the total area, it's probably about 5%. Is that correct? So this is, one thing is kind of exhilarating to notice something that after 6 years I didn't realize, which is kind of interesting. And the second thing is that I thought it was a good idea to introduce difference between events that are improbable and impossible. Me correcting Glenn Jorgensen, it's an improbable event. It's something that has extremely low probability, but it's possible. An improbable event is, for example, if you imagine a bottle that is ideally round and it is rolling on an ideally perfect surface, the probability that it stops at any point is 0. Well, yet it stops at the point. That's an improbable event that could occur very rarely. However, it is impossible that that bottle will stand on its neck and salute. That is impossible event. So when I was starting involvement here, and I would like to say that I'm honored and grateful that I can be in this company, because that is truly the best team and contact that I ever had in my life. And it's a pleasure and for a scientist to be privileged to this kind of study and to this kind of cooperation. It's a truly rare achievement. So when I was starting in 2012, I was starting with various claims and hypotheses that I felt were improbable, such as, for example, the mechanics of the wood destruction, that there was no shear, but there was a break, and at the contact that lasts only a few milliseconds, it had to be a shear. The experiment that you saw with the destruction of wood, that actually the study that Professor Bienda and I conceived and followed up originally at its inception outside of that work of the committee. And that is a sort of demonstration of how the committee works. It's efforts of people who are working in their own time, in their own effort, have no particular stake in the game, but just curiosity, science-driven curiosity of people who are interested in that. And basically, I'd like to thank for my involvement and thank you. Yeah.
At this point, we would like to show you a video of the analysis that was made by Mr. Frank Taylor, who is the lead outside expert for the Committee for Reinvestigation of the Smolensk crash. Mr. Frank Taylor is a renowned world expert on airplane crash investigation, and he was analyzing the reconstruction of the left wing just about a month ago. And this video will show his analysis of the reconstruction of the left wing. Thank you.
We had a chance to see results for last 2-3 days. Yes. And is it anything that you would like to share with public opinion about your conclusions so far? You know, is there anything that it is strong enough that you can share? And you need obviously more study, which you are going to continue for next months.
Yes.
To make more conclusions. But this 3 days, you know, perhaps gave you a chance to point out that you are certain about something.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think the evidence of looking at many photographs of parts from the wing, from the fuselage, the doors, and so forth, and seeing how they've been reconstructed here, but being able to see the original photographs as well, I have no doubt whatever that there was an explosion in there, and that the vast majority of that damage can only be explained by an explosion. Thereafter, of course, pieces fall and it can hit other things, but there are classic signs of an explosion. And as I say, that damage, the curling away from the explosion from a particular point, cannot be explained in any other way. And similarly, indeed, the leading edge, the slat, that appears to be, as far as I can see, only explained by internal pressure. And of the other things at the moment, just the spread of wreckage and the fact that the center part is very badly, well, fragmented with insulation material spread around, whereas normal speed accident like this, far more of it would have been intact, more or less intact, and with the inner and outer skins together. And of course, the passenger door just in front of the wing leading edge, which was driven into the ground, that could not possibly happen by just the aircraft hitting the ground. It just isn't possible.
Mm-hmm. And how about the famous birch tree? Do you have any opinion why it is broken?
Well, it's possible that something hit it, but it certainly wasn't this wing, from front to back. There's no doubt about that in my mind. I've always doubted the tree itself didn't look as if it was been hit by anything solid, and even some of the earlier photographs before I saw this did not look as if the wing had hit the tree. But I was not convinced. I remained with an open mind until I saw this and saw the actual damage in more detail with the pieces. The front of this, the leading edge of this wing certainly did not hit the birch tree. I can be quite certain of that.
Okay. I just want to let you know, because you didn't know so far, but exactly the same conclusion was drawn by Dutch safety experts in Netherlands. So you are very much consistent, 100% on the money.
It would be very, very surprising if any professional investigator came to any other conclusion.
Okay, very good.
The same was said by Jean Berthier from BEA.
Yeah. I mean, in some areas there can be doubts, because
Sure.
damage can be explained in different ways, but on this there is no doubt.
Okay, very good. So thank you very much.
Okay. At this point, we will move to the question and answer session. That's okay. To the question and answer session. We will have a gentleman helping us with the microphone. We plan to take, here, please take this microphone. Thank you for your help. We will be asking for about 3 to 5 questions from the floor, and then we will turn those questions to the panel. If you want a specific expert to address your question, please specify that. And also, please make sure that all the questions are respectful. Thank you. Okay.
Hello. Mr. Jorgensen, you described some of the body parts as being found prior to tree Z. Were there body parts found anywhere near where the actual plane crashed to the ground, which probably would have been consistent with a ground crash as opposed to an explosion in the air?
Any more questions? Here up front. Okay.
To the whole panel, on a
Wait. Okay, hold on, 1 moment. Okay, please continue.
To the whole panel, first of all, thank you so much for all of your work. It's amazing. You're heroes to many of us. But to the question, on a different theme, personal attacks, any cyber attacks, what has been the reaction to your work?
Mm-hmm. Here up front, please. Wait for the microphone.
My name is George Otto, professor of business here in Chicago. And my question is, was it the explosion? Was it a rocket or something from external penetration? Or was it internal? And if it's internal, who was, do you have any guess or information who did it and how they did it if it was internal?
Okay, one more question and we'll turn the, okay.
I just wanted to add to the question, to the previous question. So if there was an explosion, what kind of material has been used and how it was triggered and by whom? Definitely, that's really important. And I have a question because of the last expert presented, Mr. Tyler. Is this the same Tyler who was the investigator of the flight ITVA 970 in 1980, who claimed that there was a bomb, and then in 2013 the government of Italy did confirm that it was the missile launched by mistake?
I think
it is the same Frank Tyler.
Probably the same. Yeah. Okay. One more and we'll go to the panel.
My question is to Minister Macierewicz. Now we have two versions, the Russian version and your version. So are we finished or are we going to have another version?
Okay. Okay, so now we can turn the questions to the panel. We have 5 questions. Please make sure to answer the questions addressed to the panel. We have 1 question to Mr. Macierewicz and 1 to Glenn Jorgensen. Mr. Minister, maybe you can start.
Okay, the last question.
Closer.
Okay, the last question, if it is possible. No, it will be not. And it is not mine version and Russian question. It's the Polish version and the Russian question. And you have to choose Polish version or Russian, and it will be not third version. It's the first question. The second one, we don't know. We don't know, sir, if it was internal or external infiltration of the material, explosive material. We don't know yet. We know what happened. We know that it was explosion. But the rest problem are investigated. It will be investigated in the future.
Okay.
And the question about attacks which are on us. No, there are not any problem for us. It's a problem. It's normal situation when the Russian is guilty. They did such situation that did such attacks on everyone which probed to investigate their attacks. We know it from our history, we know it from the Katyn massacre, we know it long time. It's not very impressive of us.
Okay, Glenn?
I might answer a little of other questions also, but I just want to say that it's not the question of how many versions, it's the question, what is the evidence telling us? So and we haven't finalized our report, but we finalized the conclusions. It's very clear, and we have it confirmed at many levels. We showed you some of this confirmation today, that there were explosions in the wing, and there were explosions in the fuselage. And this is certain to us, and the evidence, all evidence that we investigate points to this very clearly. Regarding the body parts, as you saw, there were the small fragments found early at the crash site. This is from the scenario that Mack and the Miller reports describe, is unexplainable. In the scenario with the explosions, it's explainable. Besides this, we didn't mention the fact that there were 35 bodies with all their clothes or big part of their clothes torn off. And we know from science that this requires around 460 kilometers per hour, which would be something like 350 miles per hour speed to tear off clothes of the passengers. So again, a fact that was completely left out in the Mack and Miller reports. Very important fact. Regarding the location of the occupants, they are spread, they are scattered all around the crash site. None of them were found in their seats. No seats were found in one piece. All seats were found detached from the floor rail and completely destructed. This is again a fact that was not addressed in the Mack and Miller report, and very important fact. It is not in alignment with what you would expect from an airplane hitting at a shallow angle to the soil. It simply isn't. You can look at the historic facts on this. So we know regarding fragmentation of bodies from experience that it takes around 350 Gs to produce highly fragmented bodies. We know that 12 of the occupants found just in the area of this door, the left passenger door, in the area of the wing box, 12 of these were highly fragmented. So the question we're asking, and we're investigating this at the moment, and we will not conclude at this moment, but the question that obviously needs to be answered is how could these passengers, how could these occupants be so highly fragmented in this area? Okay.
Professor Bunienda.
Yeah. So also added, in terms of explosive material, every country has their own professional explosive materials, and they don't advertise what they have. Guarantee that United States have the whole variety of explosives, and Russia will have, and Poland will have, and every country will have, and these are professional explosives. These are not a piece of battle with fuel in it. We, as the Commission, we have the pyrotechnic group that is trying to figure out what kind of material produced the closest results to the results that we saw in Smolensk. So by now we found that fuel, which could be, the vapors of fuel could explode. For example, TW-800 in Long Island destroyed itself. This is Boeing 747 because of the fuel explosion in the central tank. But typically, if that would happen, you will have only few components of the airplane. In TW-800, you have the front part and the rest of the airplane that was disconnected from each other. Of course, the final results for the people is unfortunately the same, but for investigators, they look into those details. In TW-800, it was also, some witnesses thought that there is a missile going into this airplane, and the investigators look into that possibility. The point is that you should not, as an investigator, eliminate any possibility on the onset. You have to take all possibilities into consideration. The bad thing about Smolensk investigation by MAC report was that they removed every other possibility, only they investigated the pilot error. So that was not investigation. That was just looking for the, those elements that fit their agenda. So we have found that the high energy explosive needs to be used. We were able to reproduce the cutting of the wing, which produces those deformation, as was pointed out by Glenn. And it can be done without explosion of the fuel, because even if the tank is empty, it is never empty. It has also always some fuel. So we were able to accomplish that. Moreover, we are able to hide the explosive, which was linear explosive, into the goo that is used to seal the tank of the airplane, and therefore is not visible from outside. I'm not saying that was what happened. All I'm saying that we were able to produce this type of results ourselves. So even if you open the tank, which was never done because this airplane was overhauled in Samara in Russia, in return to Poland in December, just before the accident, a few months later. So the question is, can the explosive of that type could be put into the wing before the airplane is returned and stay there for several months and not to deteriorate? And the answer is yes, we reproduce that type of possibility. We are not saying that this was only the possibility, but we are saying yes, that is possible to install the explosive linear material into the tank, and this material can safely fly with this airplane for months. Nobody will even notice. It will explode only when you have the initiator of explosion, and that initiator has to be used. And you know from Iraq war that even people who are not very educated in terms of military, they produce the explosives that explode remotely by telephone, in fact, and kill American soldiers. So is it possible to remotely initiate explosive? The answer is yes. We are not saying that this was the case, but all I'm saying that it is possible. A creator of the Cranfield University School of Investigators, over 50% of all investigators of all over the world, including NTSB, are educated by Frank Taylor. So this is the same Frank Taylor that is the creator of that school. What else was, did I miss anything? Okay. I think I covered all the questions. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have any more questions? Okay, here we have questions.
I have a question in regards to human remains and examinations on them. Did you have any forensic pathologists on your team? And if so, could you give us the name of that team member? Also, want to know if there were any seats assignments on on that plane? Because we do know that that plane was a special plane. It was not a passenger plane where you have all the seats assigned to a certain people. So my question to you is, on board on that plane, as we know, there were 96 passengers. Were all of them assigned to specific seats? And if so, did you examine the locations of the human remains after the crash?
And the next question,
Considering this was an explosion, then this is a crime. And if crime is committed, there should be investigation and legal action. Are there going to be legal actions taken to sue anyone, be it Russians, be it people who arrange for the government people, for the 96 persons to be on board, be it Donald Tusk, because he was a minister then? What's the next step? I mean, we finish here, we have a coffee, there's some pretty good cookies. But where do we go from here?
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, so let a minister respond, please.
For the first question of Mr. Consul, yes, we have the people from anatomopathologists in our team, but they are experts, and it's the rule of the investigation of such accident that is not publicly announced the names of the experts. I'm so sorry, it's not possible, but yes, we have some, and we used the effects of investigation of prosecutors which have such team too.
And the next question?
The next step is the investigation of the prosecutors, of course. Mm-hmm. They will have our report, like the proof what will really happened, and they will continue their activity. It's normal.
Okay, and we can take last question, please, okay? Oh, we have now 3 questions. Okay, last round of questions. We have 3 questions raised right now.
Yes, my name is Wyslotsky. I was working once in very early investigation of a case, also of an airplane crash. And I'm interested to know whether an exhaustive testing, such as gas chromatographic tests, were conducted in this particular case on embedded remnants of explosion, particularly in the metal.
Could you repeat the last part, because we couldn't hear well?
Yes. No, what was your question, please?
Please repeat last segment of your question, because we didn't hear it well.
Okay, now whether an exhaustive testing was performed on embedded particles of gas during the explosion in metals or in human bodies.
Okay.
Which is very
Thank you.
good receptor of such.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ignite the fuel, which is kerosene.
Okay, so again, the fuel question, right? Okay, and the last question, gentleman here.
You've mentioned that this Miller Commission report was nullified. What is the legal ground for nullifying this report, and how do you explain why you can do that? Because based on my understanding is that if this is the government commission and the report is being produced, to nullify it, you don't have any grounds. And if you would like, you can eventually update it, or you can create a new one. So what is the legal ground for nullifying it?
Okay. Okay, so please, the panel, could you please address the questions?
Maybe I will answer for the last question. It will be clear the situation. I said it in my first when I refer whole situation. The Commission, like as in the other states, other countries, is a unique institution which is appropriate to define what really happened in such crash. There are no other institution. And the Commission is independent, and only the Commission can decide what really happened. From the technical point of view, of course. We are not talking now about the guilties. No, but what happened from technical point of view. And we decide and we present it to you. And it is legal, not illegal. Thank you. It's your opinion.
I think we presented a great deal of hard evidence, and if you just recall the picture showing the wingtip. Okay. Let me move on to the next questions about the kerosene. We know that kerosene is designed for aviation to avoid explosions. The case in Smolensk was the ground temperature was around 0 degrees. The plane came from high altitude where it's much colder. The fuel has a large heat capacity and is much colder. We know it's very, very difficult under these circumstances to even have a fuel explosion. However, we did experiments. I mentioned more than 70 different experiments, including experiments trying to produce a kerosene explosion. And we know from these that the kerosene explosion will act much differently than what we see here. It tends to open up, like zip or along a rivet line, but open up in a large opening rather than producing small fragments of debris. The distinct line of cut we have here is also against a kerosene explosion. It's a line of cut that passes 3 ribs of the of the wing structure. Again, it's against the fuel explosion. So we have many reasons and tests to confirm that this was no kerosene explosion in the wing. Regarding the, I think the question the gentleman in the back there had was about metal parts and fragments found or not found in bodies, and this is area that is being investigated by the prosecutor office. The Russians didn't do their work properly. They did no X-rays of the bodies as recommended by ICAO. They were neglecting and not performing good autopsies. So the evidence that we need in this will come from the exhumations. However, we know from experiments that fragments are not necessarily found in bodies under the circumstances that we are investigating. So it's not a one-to-one match that we are looking for in this case. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I think we would like to conclude our program, and in concluding, I would like to quote the most important excerpt from the technical report that was released on April 11, 2018. You can pick up a copy of this report because I think its extra copies are here. And I think the most important segment of this, if I can remind all of us, because it really summarizes of everything what was said today. The report of the Polish Committee on State Aircraft Accident Investigation on the Smolensk crash, dated July 29, 2011, the so-called Miller's report, is hereby declared null and void. Furthermore, the classification of the cause of the crash of the Tu-154M aircraft in Smolensk, Russia on April 10, 2010 as a controlled flight into terrain due to pilot error, so-called CFIT, is hereby declared as invalid and void. So I think this concludes our program today. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you everybody for putting all this effort to enable us to present the results of the technical report.